Welcome to E-Pathshala lecture series in computer science, and this course is on operating systems, and today we will learn about processes. We will understand what is meant by a process, we will learn about what process scheduling is, and we will also learn about the different operations that can be done on a process. So, what is a process? When we learnt about the different functionalities of an operating system, we learnt that process management is one of the important functions of any operating system that is being designed. So, what is a process? We write a program and we have it as a file, and when this program is executed, we call it a process. So, the process is nothing but a program in execution. So, the process execution actually will happen in a sequential fashion. And what is hence the difference between a program and a process? A program is nothing but a file, but when a program is taken for execution, the program is divided into three regions, that is the text region, the data region, and something called a stack region. The text region is nothing but the instructions corresponding to that particular program, and the data region or the data section is nothing but the global variables that you have in that particular program, and the stack region is being used whenever there is a function call in that program. Whenever there is a function call, you may have to send parameters to that particular function, and there will be local variables within that function, and once the function is executed and gets over, you will send back parameters or values, or you will return values to the calling program. So, all these, that is the parameters that you send to the function, the local variables within the function, and the return values, all will form a part of the stack section, or all these will be put into the stack section. So, whenever a program executes, you have this text, you have the data, and you have the stack region which is present. And then you also have some important registers. You have something called a program counter. The program counter is nothing but a register which has got the address of the next instruction which needs to be executed for this particular process. And you also have a stack pointer. A stack pointer will point to the top of the stack, and you have other registers which will have return values, etc., and so on. So, you have a number of registers which have different values, and all these comprise a process. So, a program is nothing but a passive entity which will be something like a file, but a process is an active entity which has got a number of things which keep on changing. So, if you look at a program, say for example, you have an editor program. The program can run many number of times, or you can have many instances of a program that is running, and all these instances will be called processes or will be different processes. So, for a single editor program, you can have multiple instances of the editors running, and each of these instances will be a process, and all these will share the text region because the instructions for the program is going to be the same, but the data will be different for each of the programs. So, the text region will be the same, the data and the other sections will be different. And it is also possible for one process to spawn or create another process or even many number of processes. So, that is a capability of a process. So, now we have seen that you have program, the program when it executes, it is called a process, and a process has got a number of other things other than the small program that you have. And when this process is executing, it will change state, or the process can be in different states during its execution. So, what do you mean by a state? A state is nothing but what a process is currently doing. Okay. So, you look at this, the process can be in different states like new state, running state, waiting state, ready state, terminated state and so on. So, look at this diagram. Initially a process, a new process is being created, and then the process is admitted inside and it goes to the ready state. So, what does this mean? A new process that is being created is now brought into the main memory and it is waiting in the main memory to get the CPU. It is ready and is waiting to get the CPU. And there can be many processes that are in this ready state. That is, there can be many processes that are in the main memory and in the ready state waiting to get the CPU. And one of these processes will be chosen and will be given the CPU, and that process moves to the running state. And there can be many other processes still waiting here, but there can be only one process which is in the running state and is currently using the CPU. And while using the CPU, this process may have to wait for some event to happen, or it may have to wait for I/O to happen and so on. So, in that case, the process will move from the running state to the waiting state. Say for example, you have a process that is currently running and it needs to print something to the output device. Printing will need to access the output device, maybe the monitor, or you may even write to some other hard disk, or you may even write to a USB drive, whatever. So, this output will be slower than the processor. So, the process will move from the running state to the waiting state, waiting for that particular output operation to get over, and it will be in the state till the operation gets over. And now you can see that there is no process that is using the CPU. So, when this process is in the waiting state, some other process can be chosen from the ready state and be moved to the running state. I told you earlier that there can be many processes in the ready state waiting in the main memory and waiting to get the CPU. Only one process can be in the running state and only one process can use the CPU at a particular time. And when the process which was running moves to the waiting state, the process which is in the ready state can be moved to the running state. And this process which was in the waiting state, once it finishes its job, say the output printing to the output device gets over, then the process will move back to the ready state and again wait here to get the CPU back. And suppose if a process while it is running, if its time duration gets over, it is possible to give a particular time duration for a particular process. We can say that this process has to execute for only a certain amount of time, and if that time duration gets over, the process can be moved back to the ready state, wait again here in the ready state to get back the CPU. And this process can move back and forth here between running state, waiting state, ready state, etc. and so on during its lifetime, and once it finishes off all its instructions, the process is terminated and it moves to the terminated state. So, this diagram is called a process state transition diagram, which shows the different states in which a process can be. So, this diagram shows the overall thing that happens. You have a new process, ready state, and it can be moved to the running state and it can wait for some I/O or event and then go back to the ready state again once the I/O event gets over. And similarly, when it is in the running state, if the time slice gets over, there can be an interrupt, it can go back to the ready state, or while in running state after it finishes, it can exit and go back to the terminated state. And the process has got a number of different parameters or It has a number of different qualities, and all of these can be represented in a process control block. So, the information about each process that is present in the operating system is maintained by the operating system. So, if there are 10 processes and each of these 10 processes will have a data structure which maintains information about itself, and this is maintained by the operating system. And what is maintained in this? It is called the process control block, and the things maintained are the state of the process is maintained. The process can be in a ready state or running state and so on. So, what state the process is in, that is maintained in the PCB. And then you have the program counter value. As I told you, it is the address of the next instruction to be executed. And then you have the values of different registers, say accumulators, index registers, etc. All these are maintained. And then say CPU scheduling information. Say the process can be assigned a process priority, the priority is maintained, different scheduling parameters can be maintained. Then memory management information. So, for memory management information, the process can maintain base and limit register values, and these base register value and limit register values are also maintained by the operating system. And you have number of other accounting information like how much amount of CPU time the process had used, how much time it spent in user mode, how much time it spent in kernel mode, etc. and so on. All this information can be maintained. Then IO status information, say the IO device it is used and time it spent on IO, all these can be maintained. And all these they are maintained in something called a process control block. The process control block is a data structure which maintains all these information, and there is one PCB corresponding to each process, and different PCBs can be connected together by means of pointers. So, you can see that you have a pointer which can point to the next process control block. So, the process, each process has got different parameters, different values, and that all those are maintained in a process control block, and this is maintained by the operating system. And now, see in this diagram you can see that process P0 is executing, that is it is currently in the running state, and now there is an interrupt and the process has to move back to the ready state. So, you need to save the state of this process, because this process has not fully completed execution. It is executed halfway through, but there is now some interrupt or some system call which has to happen in the kernel mode. So, what this process is done, you save the state of all the process of this process into this PCB 0, and then this process is idle for some amount of time. What you do in the meantime, the CPUs should not be idle. So, what you do? You reload the state of process P1 from PCB 1, and that process P1 is made to execute. And when this process P1 needs to break, or there is an interrupt or a system call, then the state of process P1 is saved in PCB 1, and you reload the state from PCB 0 of process 0, and process 0 will start executing. So, here you can see that when process 0 is going to the waiting state, the state of that process 0 is saved in PCB 0, and the state of process 1 is loaded from PCB 1, and process P1 executes. So, this is called actually scheduling. So, basically we are looking at multi-program systems. See, multi-program systems, you have some process which will run at all the time. Okay. So, that is the CPU should not be kept idle, you have to have maximum utilization of the CPU, So, you need to have some process which will be using the CPU always. And if you look at a time sharing system, this process must be switched between the process must be switched so that you can increase the response time for the users. And if there are many processes and you have a uniprocess system where you have only one CPU, then only one process can use the CPU and the others can wait. So, there should be someone who decides on who will be using the CPU next. So, for that you have a number of queues that have been maintained. So, initially when a process comes into the system, it is being put into a queue called the job queue. So, this job queue has got all the processes in the system which are coming afresh into the system. And from this job queue, there should be someone who picks up a process from the job queue and puts it into the main memory, because a process to execute, it should be present in the main memory. And the main memory size is small. You cannot put all the processes into the main memory. You can only put a few processes into the main memory. So, the person or the scheduler or the program that decides on which process from the job queue should go to the main memory is done by a long term scheduler. And so some processes will be taken from the job queue and will be put into the main memory. In the main memory, they are all in the ready queue. And the ready queue has a set of all processes that are residing in the main memory and that are waiting to get the CPU. And then you can also have a number of device queues. As I told you, the process during its lifetime can move from the ready state to the waiting state, waiting for some IO to happen. And then at that time, the process will be moved from the ready queue to different device queues depending on for what it is waiting to, Say if it is waiting for input, it will be moved to a input device queue. If it is waiting for output, then it will be moved to an output device queue and so on. So, during the lifetime of a process, you can see that the process can be moved from between different queues, from the ready queue to the device queue, etc. and so on. It will be moving back and forth between different queues. So, this diagram shows how the process moves, or you have ready queue, there is a header and there are PCB 7 and PCB 2 in this ready queue, which means there are process 7 and 2 in this ready queue. There is a head that points to the first process in the queue and the tail that points to the last process in the queue, and each process has got a pointer to the next process in the queue. And this is a queue corresponding to a magnetic tape. This is again a queue corresponding to another magnetic tape. This is a queue corresponding to a disk. This is a queue corresponding to another terminal unit and so on. So, terminal unit, there is one process which is trying to print something maybe to the terminal, and here there are 3 processes that are waiting to write to the disk. Disk IO is slow. So, all processes cannot finish immediately, they may have to be queued and they wait to access the disk. So, it is this. There can be multiple queues corresponding to different devices, corresponding to different states, and the process can move back and forth between the different queues during its lifetime. So, this figure shows how a process moves between the different queues. Initially, you have a process which comes to the ready state and be in the ready queue. You can use a CPU, and there can be an IO request at that time and it will be put to the IO queue. And once the IO gets over, it will go back to the ready queue waiting to get the CPU. And while using the CPU, it is also possible for the time slice to expire. That is, each process is given a particular amount of time, and if this time duration gets over, then it can again go back to the ready queue and wait to get the CPU. The other possibility is this process can create a new child process, and this process can wait for the child to finish off, and once it finishes, it can go back to the ready queue. And similarly, the process can wait for an interrupt to happen, and once the interrupt occurs, it can go back to the ready queue. So, a process moves between different queues during its lifetime, and there should be someone who does the selection of who will go from a particular queue to another queue, and that is done by 3 different schedulers. You have got one called the long term scheduler, then a short term scheduler, and something called a medium term scheduler. I told you that process initially will come to the job queue, and from the job queue you need to pick some process and put into the main memory, and that is done by the long term scheduler. And in the main memory you have got a number of processes, and only one process can be used by the CPU, and this selection of which process will be using the CPU is done by the short term scheduler. And if you look at the frequency of execution of the long term scheduler and the short term scheduler, you can see that the long term scheduler is less frequent, the short term scheduler is more frequent, because once a process is given the CPU, it will use the CPU only for some amount of time, and then it have to release the CPU either because the time slice gets over or because of IO or any other reason. And when the CPU is relinquished by the process, then the CPU has to be given another process. So, this happens more frequently compared to the long term scheduler. The long term scheduler will run only when a process finally completes and is out of the main memory. You need to bring some other process into the main memory, and only then the long term scheduler will run. So, it will run more less frequently. I repeat again, the long term scheduler will run less frequently compared to the short term scheduler. And so, this long term scheduler has got enough time to decide on which process has to be brought into the main memory. So, what the long term scheduler can do is that it can pick up processes such that it is a good mix of CPU bound and IO bound processes. So, what exactly is CPU bound process? A CPU bound process is one in which there are no more number of instructions, CPU related instructions that will be executed, or it will have less IO instructions. But in an IO bound process, we will have a number of IO related instructions. So, if it is an IO bound process, then frequently it will have to switch between the running state and the waiting state, waiting for IO to get over. But if it is a CPU bound process, once it is given a time slice or a time period, it can use the maximum time period because it will execute only CPU related instructions. It may not go for IO, may not wait for IO, but if it is an IO bound process, then it will be it may not even use the entire time slice it is being given. It will work, it will execute a few CPU instructions, and then it will move to the IO waiting for some IO to get over. So, the process that is being selected by the long term scheduler should be a good mix of CPU bound as well as IO bound, because if all processes that have been selected are CPU bound, then the IO devices will be idle, or if all processes are IO bound, the CPU will remain idle. So, you need to choose such a way that the CPU as well as the IO devices are not kept idle. The other scheduler I have been telling about is this medium term scheduling. This medium term scheduler will pick process from the CPU, that is partially executed process will be swapped out into the secondary storage device, and then they will be brought into the main memory. That is, you have the long term scheduler will pick certain process and put it into the main memory, but in due course of time you may need more space in the main memory, or you may have to bring in some other process into the main memory which is of a high priority. Then some other process which is partially executed but still present in the main memory can be moved to the swap device to the secondary storage device, and then you can bring in the required process that you want into the main memory. So, these partially executed process being swapped out and later swapped into the ready queue in the main memory is done by the medium term scheduler. So, this takes care of swapping, and this can even improve the process mix. Say if you have some IO bound process, then you can move it to the swap device for some amount of time, then you can bring in some other process which is CPU bound, so that you can improve the process mix. And now we will see what is meant by the context of a process. So, we saw that different state and different information about a process is being saved into a PCB, and whatever is being put into the PCB comprise the context of a process. So, the context of a process comprises the text, the data, the stack, the different register values, the different memory values, different data structures related to the kernel, related to the operating system, and all these put together form the context of a process. And what is meant by context switch? I told you that, say when a process is moving from the running state to the waiting state, say you will save the state of the process in a PCB and then bring in the state of the new process. So, the saving the state or saving the context of the old process and loading the context for the new process is called context switch, and this takes some amount of time, and this time, that is the context switch time, is an overhead, because the system does not do any useful work during that particular time. And this context switch time will depend on the speed of the memory, the number of registers which you have to copy, because each process will have certain values that have been stored in the registers. We need to copy and save all those values, and the existence of, say, special instructions. This again depends on the hardware also, because say some certain hardware, they have capabilities of multiple register sets. That is, for one process you can use one register set, for the next process you can use the next register set. You do not have to copy the first register set and then load the next process values into the same register set. So, if you have such a kind of a support, then you can make the context switch time much faster. So, now we will see about different operations that can happen on processes. You can have two types of operation major I am talking about in this session, the process creation and process termination. So, any process can create any number of processes, and the creating process is called the parent process, and the processes that have been created are called the children processes, and this will form a tree like structure. So, one parent can create multiple children, the children in turn can create multiple children, and so on, and it can form a tree like structure. And each process needs to be identified by the operating system. It needs to have an identifier or a number, which is generally called a process identifier. And in Linux based systems, say Unix or Linux, you can see that you can see the different processes that have been created or that are currently running in the system using the PS command. So, it will list all the processes that are present in the system. But now, when a process is being created, the parent process creates, say, 5 children, and what will happen to the resources in the system? Say if the parent has been allotted resources, the same resources can be shared between the different children, or the children can share only a subset of the parent's resources, or it can be the case where the parent and the children do not share resources at all, they will have independent resources. And similarly, the execution of the parent and the children, the parent and the children process, they can execute concurrently, and it can also happen that the parent will wait till the children finishes or terminates, or the parent can terminate earlier than the children, and these implementations vary for different operating systems. And the other one is the address space of the parent and the child. The address space is nothing but the text, data and the stack sections of a process. When a new child process is created by the parent, the child can share the address space of a parent, or the child can have a new program that has been loaded into it. In the case of Unix, you have got the fork system call which creates the new process. the exe system call can be used to replace the process memory with a new program. The fork will make a copy of the parent process, but the exec will overlay the copy with some other program. That is also possible. So, you can have a fork where the parent creates a child process and the child executes and it can exit, and the parent can even wait for the child to exit. So, once the child finishes off, terminates, till then the parent will wait, and once the child finishes off, the parent will resume its operation. So, in this class we have learnt about different processes. We have learnt about what processes are. We saw that processes are active entities, and we saw that a process can be in different states during its lifetime, and we saw that the context of a process can be represented by a process control block, and we saw they can have appropriate schedulers that will move processes from one state to another. Thank you.